What's up, everybody? Peter X. Coffer here, and welcome to another episode of Classic Songs. And for the first time, I'm actually doing a live song, and hey, it is what it is. My man Jimi Hendrix. I have my T-shirt on, the cover here of "Are You Experienced?" So interesting. I learned a lot, and in doing the research for this. I know a lot of people like to use Chat GPT for their research, but there's a reason why I don't do it because there's always so much going on, when it comes to music history. Um, so today we're doing Wild Thing, and this is a live performance by Jimi Hendrix. You see the thumbnail here, one of the probably the first really famous picture of a live performance. I mean, it was everywhere. It's still iconic. We're gonna get into the story of kind of what was going on with that. So you can actually go on YouTube and watch the performance. It's amazing. And Jimmy has, he did a set of 9 songs, and believe uh I think 4 of them are from his first album. The other 5 are covers. We'll get to that in a minute. So it's interesting. When you think of the big concerts from the 60s, and remember, we're not doing stadiums yet. I mean, you're either doing concert halls with 3,000, 6, 7, 8,000 at the most, clubs like the Troubadour in Los Angeles, the Fillmore East, Fillmore West, which Hendrix played a lot. Fillmore East was in New York City. Fillmore West was in um, L.A. The Whiskey a Go Go, where the Hendrix played there too. I would think, but that's where the Doors started off. Motley Crue came through there in the late '70s and '80s, and Van Halen and all those LA folks did the Troubadour and the Whiskey a Go Go, and that's where the Doors started off at the Troubadour, and then they got promoted and went to the Whiskey a Go Go, and they're both still open. That's on my to do list, is just go over there, go to LA and take a look. So when you talk about the great '60s concerts, you have obviously the Shea Stadium concert for the Beatles, their last big concert. You have the Monterey Pop Festival, and I thought it was famous because of Hendrix, but we'll get to that in a minute. There's other great things going on here at Monterey. The third would be Woodstock, and the last is Altamont, the Speedway. Not a good thing. People, basically say it's the end of the '60s. That's where the Rolling Stones played. They did a free concert. They couldn't find a venue. It was last minute, and they had the Hell's Angels do security. Yeah, and well, I mean, and then they filmed it on top of it. So yeah, that didn't go real well. The Hell's Angels are undisciplined. Well, we know who the Hell's Angels are, and anyway, so they killed one of the black concert goers right in front of the stage. I think stabbed him to death. They said he had a gun. Most people, most, that was never corroborated. They don't think that, but they were beating up, the crowd just in general, like kind of random, and it's weird watching it. Probably need to go back and take, but I think when all this is going down, of all the songs the Stones are playing, I believe it's "Sympathy for the Devil," and Mick is pleading with the crowd to calm down and pleading with the Hell's Angels to no avail. And Yeah, not a good scene. That's a really interesting, visually too, because it's now you go to a concert and the stage, and the acts are looking down on the stage, where the stage, for Ultima wasn't that high. Um, So what's interesting, here too is the crowd because Shea Stadium, the fans are screaming. They can barely hear the music. Um, uh, and that's one of the reasons the Beatles we're not doing this anymore. Well, I mean, you're making stuff up on the fly, and doing the music. I mean, the amplification system that the Beatles used for Shea Stadium was not suited for a venue that size. And I think obviously by the time Woodstock rolls around, they have a better idea of how to do halfway decent sound, even though you had 500,000 people at Woodstock. So I mean, it's estimated 25,000 and 90,000 went through. The Monterey Festival. It occurred from June 16th to 18th, which is a Monday through Friday in 1967, Monterey. It's in the Bay Area. Get this: tickets were $3 to $6.50. Um, so yeah. So anyway, I was here I am doing my Gemini thing, going on tangents. So I was talking about the crowd and how they screamed. You want to hear. Go listen to "Got Live" if you want it by the Rolling Stones. I think that live album was released in '65, and the fans are screaming their heads off through the girls through the whole concert. By the time you get to the '67, it's really interesting because folks kind of are. I mean, it's almost like a golf match, and then in between songs, they clap. It's really strange, then to see how it is when you get to the '70s and you have Kiss with all their pyrotechnics and everything else. So it's interesting watching the crowd, even when you listen to Woodstock, 500,000 people. I mean, it's very polite, and it's like a tennis match or a golf match, and then they applaud between songs. It's really odd. Now you go to a concert and everybody's singing the lyrics. So '70s, '80s, and '90s. I mean, folks were dancing and hooting and hollering. It's just so it's kind of acts are feeling, trying to figure out this new live venue stuff, and the fans are doing the same thing. So yeah, it was very interesting. Watching the fans because they did do a documentary of Monterey. So here's where Monterey gets interesting. Um, so Hendrix played. He opened up for the Isley brothers, and I can't think of. Oh, one of the second generation Isleys, he's their guitarist, and he pretty heavily influenced. Jimmy sat down and taught him some stuff. I want to say it's Ernie Isley, and so Ernie is one of the great funk guitarists, but is also very rock. I mean, listen to Who's That Lady. I mean, he has his own style. He definitely Ernie Isley uses the wah wah pedal, which Hendrix brought in and used a little bit, but funk in the '70s, you had a lot of the wah wah pedal. So Hendrix, played with the Isleys. He played for I think a couple of weeks with Little Richard, and Little Richard's playing the concert, and the crowd's going crazy, and he thinks it's him, and he looks over, and there's Jimi Hendrix playing the guitar with his teeth. Well, Little Richard ain't having that, so but Little Richard respected Hendrix, so he did give him. He didn't just kick him out to the curb on the side of the highway and be like, "Bye." He's like, "Okay, here's the bus ticket back to New York City," because I think Hendrix stayed in Greenwich Village, uh, during this time, and so yeah, he went back and got on with some other acts probably. So Hendrix, out of Seattle. He goes. He plays in different bands for other people, like as I said, the Isley Brothers and Little Richard, and then briefly he has a band that he fronts, Jimmy James. I can't remember. He changed his name to Jimmy James. Briefly. Now the interesting thing is his very first concert as a as a solo actor, as the lead, as the band leader, was here in Indianapolis on Indiana Avenue. So it's pretty cool. I was actually talking to we were I was at an event for uh, historical preservation nonprofit for the Indiana Avenue area. And one of the guys was, I was talking to one of the people there, and I said, you realize, Hendrix literally, this was at the so now the Urban League is on Indiana, and the Urban League, Indianapolis Urban League headquarters is on Indiana Avenue, and the Walker Theater is still there. So that's what, Indiana Avenue used to be all the clubs and the businesses of the black community. Now, it used to be Indiana University, Purdue University, IUPUI. Now, Purdue and Indiana split off. It's a pretty big university. I mean, 25, 30,000 students. That's where Indiana Avenue used to be. So, I mean, most of that stuff is gone. I'm pretty sure the club where Hendrix played is gone. But I was talking with a guy, and he's like, "Yeah, Hendrix tried to hit on my grandmother, and good thing my grandfather was there and swooped in and got grandma out of there." So interesting small world. But anyway, you know me, I'm in Gemini mode. I'm just I'm bobbing and weaving. So so Hendrix leaves New York City because of I mean, here he is playing rock and roll music, and he always had, even when he came back and got big, he had this, uh because black folks were kind of done with the blues, and African Americans, we have this thing where, hey, when we move, I mean, funk was rising and the blues, and funk came out of the blues. Come on. Um but young people were just like, yeah, I'm not feeling the blues no more. And they were looking at Hendrix like, dude, like, this is white folk stuff. And Hendrix was like, what do you mean? I mean, I did the Chitlin circuit, and he did do the Chitlin circuit, so he played with a lot of the blues. I mean, he played with B.B. King. He played with, Albert King, and, he played with all those guys, before he started hooking up and bands before the Isley Brothers and Little Richard. So he had this problem, and he was just kind of like, stuck in between, you know, um, an older music and that young black folks weren't having anymore, and new music. He wasn't into the funk, but we'll get to eventually we'll get to that. I mean, he did bring. Hendrix had his own brand of funk, and certainly if you go listen to Machine Gun, um, uh, the band of Gypsies. I mean, he's doing that chicken scratch guitar, and there's he had uh, Buddy Miles, and I forget who. I think Buddy's the drummer. There, he liked trios, but he had a good bassist with the band of Gypsies, a black band, and they had some funk to them. But and so Hendrix is caught, in this quandary, and there's that going on, and then I mean, it's 1965, 64, 65, still pretty racist. So Hendrix, so he ran into who ended up being his first manager, played with the Animals, and oh, I can't think of it, Eric Burden. And so he was like, well, go, come with me to London, because London's a little more open. The blues was huge. The blues was huge in Europe and in London. And even through the 70s and 80s, the Rolling Stones and Eric Clapton and folks, when they toured Europe, they took the blues classic guys with them, to pay so they can get their flowers, so to speak, and feed their families and pay the bills. But the blues was always huge, much bigger in Europe. And so they knew he would do better in starting in London than he would, in the US. So he went into London. He was there for about a year and a half. And that's when, so he, so and then he battled with Clapton. You know, he rubbed shoulders with Clapton and the Stones and the Who. So let's fast forward to Monterey. So here's where Monterey gets interesting. This is what I didn't know. I knew this was the U.S. debut, you know, for the Who and Hendrix. Obviously, Hendrix had played clubs, but he'd never played an event like this. But get this. Look who else made their big debut. Now, these acts had played clubs and stuff, but they had never played a venue, you know, with an audience like this. So it was Hendrix, The Who, Janis Joplin, and Otis Redding. So you had a coming out party for four huge acts, and all four of these acts are in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I did not know that this was the coming out for Otis and Janis Joplin. I mean, that's just freaking. I mean, that's why now this is such a famous, you know, concert because um, because of the coming out parties for these folks. This is the first time Otis Redding had played to he I think he played the Whiskey a Go Go, you know, which is a typical, you know, club bar. You know, it's famous, but it's not, you know, played for some white folk. But this is the first time he played the white folks other than the Whiskey a Go Go. And he probably played at most 700-800 people at the Whiskey a Go Go. Well, Otis killed it, Janis killed it, and the Who and Hendrix in their own way killed it. The headline acts, these are the ones that were known at the time: Simon and Garfunkel, Mamas and the Papas, Jefferson Airplane, the Byrds, and Booker T and MGs out of Stax, and or Otis Redding was out of Stax too. And then no shows, the Beach Boys and the Kinks. The Kinks were kind of banned from playing in the U.S. for, you know, union issues, I guess. And I think the Beach Boys ended up having scheduling difficulties. So, you know, putting Hendrix into context, so his first album, Are You Experienced, bam, was released May 12th, 1967. And this takes place June 16th to 18th, 1967, so a month and 4 days. So Hendrix played 9 songs. Let me give you the set list here. And 4 of them were his own songs. The rest of them were blues covers. So he starts off with Killing Floor, Foxy Lady, Like a Rolling Stone. He loved Dylan. That third song in the set. Love Dylan. Rock Me Baby. Hey Joe. Can You See Me? The Wind Cries Mary, and Purple Haze. And he closes with Wild Thing by the Trogs. So Hendrix and the Who ran and were very familiar with each other and were usually friends, but sometimes enemies. So they were frenemies, but usually friends. Even today, the members of the Who, speak of Hendrix fondly, but they were frenemies. On this Sunday night, the final night of Monterey, because neither one of them wanted to close. They were pretty good live acts, and so they drew straws, and the Who ended up having to close. And Hendrix knew what was coming with the Who, so he knew he had to top that. So here's what the Who did. I did a trios with the Who and the Stones and the Beatles when it comes to branding. And really, you want to trace the punk. It goes back to they were probably the first punk band. I mean, there is garage music in the mid '60s coming out of California too. But I mean, they smash guitars and whatnot. So so the Who. So Hendrix knows what the Who is going to do. He's seen them before. He's in the clubs. They've probably seen each other play 20, 30 times. So they know what's coming. So just to let you know the Who, I mean, Pete Townsend smashes his guitar. They set off smoke bombs behind the the amps, and Keith Moon kicks over his drum set. Now, keep this in mind, this is after Hendrix played. So Hendrix knew this was coming. And so, Jimmy did Jimmy shit. Um, so, I mean, Wild Thing was originally done by the Trugs. He covers it. He never did it. There's no studio version I'm aware of Hendrix does of doing this. It's a very risque sexual song for 1967 or whenever the Trogs, 65, 66, whenever they released it. And, Hendrix grabs and runs with it. So, so he starts off, doing whatever sorcery Hendrix does. I mean, he's doing dive bombs and just screeching and just sounds, and then he gets into the song, and I mean, he takes all of the eroticism and sexiness of the song and amplifies it. So, he plays behind his back during the song. He humps the speakers with the guitar, um, uh, towards the end. This clock's in just under 7 minutes. And then he puts the guitar on the ground. He straddles it. I don't know what, I think he's whispering, incantations, magical incantations. He does sorcery with the guitar. So he's getting ready to do his sorcery, and he's doing all this and, whatever, whatever, whatever. And then he knows what the Who's going to do. So put a can of lighter fluid behind the speakers beforehand. He gets the lighter fluid, pours it on the guitar and lights his guitar on fire, and then he smashes his guitar. So the iconic photo, nobody is, again, his album's only been out for a month. I doubt if he even has radio play yet. I mean, this is the coming out party, because the media, grabs this and runs with it. This is, so I doubt if Hendrix is getting any radio play before this. And, yeah, so the rest is history. I mean, the iconic picture that, is shot and, it's slapped on everywhere, and Hendrix is the dude. And so get who, Hendrix, he goes on in maybe 20 dates, and he opens up for the Monkees. So could you imagine, Hendrix, the Monkees are playing teeny boppers, and Hendrix is open up. That didn't last very long. The Monkees were like, yeah, this dude here is a little much. Let's go our separate ways. And Hendrix, I mean, he has his album, but there's plenty of blues covers, Hendrix could play. So, quickly Hendrix is on his own headlining, because nobody wanted to, look, if the Who, Monterey didn't want to, follow, Hendrix, the Monkees sure the hell didn't. So, anyway, so, if you watch the video, Hendrix does, throw the neck of his guitar out to the crowd. So, and he was a big Fender Stratocaster guy. So, one of the big mysteries in rock and roll history is what happened to the guitar. Two things happened. Frank Zappa gave that guitar to him, and Frank Zappa claims he picked up the burned guitar and cleaned it up, and reassembled it. Now, back then it was basically Gibson or Fender. Now there's other good companies that, high quality guitar companies, and, that kind of do their own thing. There's a lot of Gibson or particularly Fender imitators out there, and there have been, even back, in the 60s, there were folks that would do Fender imitators, and obviously I assume they paid Fender something, for imitating the Stratocaster or the Jazzmaster or the Telecaster. But the difference between Fender and Gibson back then, and even these other ones now, is you can take apart the fenders. You know, you can swap out the pickups, and you know, you can take the bolt and take the neck off. So, Frank Zappa, you know, got a new neck and, you know, cleaned it up. If you look at the guitar, it's a beautiful guitar too. And supposedly Dweezil Zappa, his son, has inherited it and plays it. You know, Dweezil's is a musician in his own right. So that's theory number one. And you know, Dweezil Zappa's, you know, is pushed very hard at this is the guitar. Theory number two is you know, a collector had it, and you know, for years, and then it went to auction in 2008 and sold for $1.8 million. I don't know who's no, nobody really knows which, whether it's A or B, but you know, hey, everybody loves a good mystery. So yeah, everybody, you know, I love my history. I'm super fired up to do this episode, and super fired up, you know, learning the history of Monterey. Like, man, this is why it's one of the big four concerts of the '60s. I knew it was, but I didn't realize that it was also Janis and Otis doing their coming out party. And from all accounts, the crowd really liked Otis and Janis as well. So, you know, all four of them in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Actually, I mean, Simon and Garfunkel, and who were the headliners again? I think the Byrds are in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Jefferson Airplane. So yeah, I mean, you had a lot of Rock and Roll Hall of Famers on the Mamas and the Papas. I think they're into. But hey, what a lineup! What a coming out party for folks. And gosh, I wish I was there. I mean, even I think for $3 and $6.50. I mean, that's still in today's, even with how crazy inflation is, still $30 in $24 to go in there and see that. I'm like, man, if you could time travel, I'd love to try to travel back and go to that concert. So yeah, what a trip. Yeah, so let me hit this close. Yeah, I'm a huge Hendrix fan. You don't have to play guitar to be influenced by Hendrix. I mean, Hendrix. I've said this. When I did the top 10 most influential guitarists in classic rock history. That Hendrix looked at the guitar differently. He looked at it as an effects instrument. And you know what? I mean, I use guitar samples and what do you call these things? Digital replicas of guitars that you can play on the keyboard. But you can do a lot of the things that Hendrix did with guitar with synthesizers, and not, just with, synthesizers and patches and manipulating, the different ways and stuff with synthesizers. And it's interesting because nobody's really been able to replicate what Hendrix did, on guitar, really. I mean, when it comes to his special effects, but you can do that on the synthesizer. So he is very, present in my music. I always, every time I have a song on my second album, Cyberfunk 2020, the, geez, my memory, but um, oh, wow. Yeah, my song is called the Reality Distortion Syndrome, and it's the third song on my second album, Cyberfunk 2020. And I always, every time I hear, listen to that song, I'm like, what would Hendrix do? How would he recreate that with a guitar? Because I know he could. And I wasn't thinking Hendrix when I did that, but I was like, man, this is pretty Hendrix-esque. And so, he lives in, it's actually easier to do Hendrix, as I said earlier, with synthesizers than it is to do Hendrix with guitars. So Anyway, let me hit this close. Thank you for coming through. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel. I got 5 of my own albums I record under the name Exodus, Xodus. Um, got 5 albums here on YouTube and attached to the channel, and all 5 of my albums run all the major streaming services. My first album is called Book One, and I also do write science fiction fantasy. So I have 2 novels and a novella on Amazon. And I write under the name Peter Exodus O'Coffer. So thank you again for coming through, and I will see you next episode.